Juggle bills, can't get through the stack. What am I talking about? Well, no, it's not about juggling bills through Christmas. It's about juggling bills debt binge that Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders and parts of America and the whole UK have been doing to make their economies or prop their economies. We've been talking about this where if you do own something or you do own a piece of real estate, you're tapping into it to binge off the debt, using your homes as ATM machines, the whole 9 yards, creating this perfect storm we're in. Well, this article was posted or was sent to me by my man Gary. So let's take a look at it. Canada has been entirely dependent on debt binge to create the illusion of strong economy. Oh, happy holidays. Well, let's not forget the $200 billion of illegal money that's been laundered from China through Canada. Let's not forget that, because without that, Canada would be in a recession without that illegal money flowing through the Canadian economy and keeping the working poor middle class completely out of their own markets. Here's a holiday season thought for you. No matter how you slice it, Canada has been entirely dependent on debt binge to create an illusion of a strong economy. That comes from David Rosenberg, chief economist at Gulsick Schiff Associates, who always has an interesting way of putting things. Mr. Rosenberg did not tie the comments to the holiday season, but by the way, I did that because, well, it's holiday season and we're talking about spending and debt. In case Mr. Rosenberg was commenting in a research report, clients about the last consumer and corporate debt numbers from StatsCan. The Globe and Mail's Matt Lundy reports those numbers last week showed household debt burden, or the ratio of credit market debt to disposable income, rising in the third quarter 175.9% from the revised 175.4 in the second quarter. Well, guys, it's once housing is unobtainable and it goes 4 times past your annual income, then you're in a lot of trouble. When more than 40% of your income is going towards net income is going towards rent and basic utilities, you're living off debt to live, and that's why it's happening all over the Commonwealth. This, Mr. Rosenberg noted, came even as disposable income rose another solid rate, the beginning of an annual pace of 3.8%. He cited the fact of the mortgage credit is up more than 4% from a year ago, and that it is a proliferation of non-mortgage debt that is unprecedented. Credit maker debt reached almost $2.3 trillion in the quarter. Of that, mortgages accounted for almost $1.5 trillion. And according to Equifax Canada, defaults on non-mortgage debt, while still modest, are now their sharpest for the third quarter since 2012. So fourth quarter numbers will be coming out soon, guys. If households ever reduce their borrowing, this category will be the first to go, and their consumption spending will go with it, Mr. Rosenberg said. The Bank of Canada has been expressing concerns over the financial vulnerabilities posed by swollen household debt levels. Remember, guys, for every, I think, what is it? It's almost at 200% for household debt. For every dollar made is almost $2 owed. So for every dollar a Canadian household makes, they owe back almost $2. Australia is like $2.07 for every dollar they make. And they're doing a lot worse, but still, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of us are doing bad. The Bank of Canada has been expressing concerns over the financial vulnerabilities posed by swollen household debt levels. Oh yeah, in the UK, it's $2.11 for every pound made. They owe back £2 11 pence, or whatever you call it. Kind of want to throw that out there. Note 2, the debt service ratio, or how much disposable income goes to debt payments, is now recorded of about 15%. Imagine that this is even higher than the financial obligations ratio 2 decades ago, where the interest rates were more than double today's level, Mr. Rosenberg of that number. Remember, guys, we've been talking about this on trends in the housing market for years. Remember when interest rates were 6, 8, 12, 17%? Well, they had to spike rates in 81, 82, and you see the price of gold. But anyways, they did that, and literally overnight they started repairing the economy. Literally overnight when rates went through the roof. But they're constantly stimulating things, pumping money into the markets, and they're constantly finding these magic alakazam tricks behind the smoke and mirrors to keep this thing going. First time home buyer loans, interest only mortgages, 100% loan to value mortgages, all kinds of garbage that's out there.
Imagine this is even higher than the financial obligations of ratio of 2 decades ago. I read that. You still have to repay the principal, which represents the mountain of debt, he said. This explains why the Canadian consumer will remain in slow growth mode for years to come. With or without Trudeau Liberal doling out more goodies to low and middle income households, there really is no physical solution for the ever-rising, unprecedented share of income devoted towards debt service repayments. We tend to focus on how consumers are faring in the terms of debt, but Mr. Rosenberg noted the news isn't any better for corporate Canada, which brought him his suggestion of illusion of a strong economy. Sun Life Financial Inc. is set to purchase a majority stake in the UK-based Infrared Capital Partners of a global infrastructure of real estate investment manager, the Globe and Mail's Claire O'Hara reports. I hope they're buying it on 50 cents or 60 cents on the dollar. That's just my opinion. The Toronto-based insurer will acquire 80% of interest rates in Infrared for £300 million. As a part of the transaction, Sun Life committed to co-investors US $400 million to support the launch of the new Infrared investment products. Fiat Chrysler Peugeot makers PSA have reached a binding agreement for their roughly US $50 billion merger, which will reshape the global car industry. France's PSA and Italian maker Fiat Chrysler, which are yet to decide on a name for their new company, will now start on delivering their pledge to cut costs by $4.1 billion a year without closing factories.
Now, restructuring, layoffs. We're seeing a bunch of closures here in Canada with Chrysler, Ford plants. You're seeing steel companies down in the U.S. closing their mills, steel mills. So you're seeing, and lumber mills are also facing this dilemma here in Western Canada, all the way down to Washington State and Oregon State. So there's quite a bit happening with restructuring. We're seeing lots of closures in the retail sector of things, and that is a big stab to the private sector.
That will be harder with politicians and strong labor unions in both France and Italy worried about job losses at the combined business that will employ about 400,000 people. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire welcomed the move to bring together Europe's second and third biggest car makers, while adding to the French government a key shareholder in PSA would remain vigilant on the matters, including where decision centers are located in the new group. Canada's annual inflation rate above 2% in November, but economists expect it will cool next year.
So remember, the job numbers were so good during the elections. A lot of it was public sector jobs, and then now the next month after the elections, it was the month of November, they announced, I can't remember, was it 7? It was just a big number. I can't remember what it was. 200,000 job loss. I couldn't remember. I don't have the number on my mind right now, but it was quite a bit, quite substantial. So it's kind of funny. Just right after the election, the prime minister wins his seat in office, but then wins the election, but then boom, everything just falls apart right after. Kind of funny, eh? And now, I saw an interview last night with Brian Mulroney, our former Prime Minister of Canada, how he was laughing at what things are and laughing about the debt load and laughing on how this country is turned into an absolute joke and how nothing is being taken care of and their Canadians aren't paying their bills anymore.
The latest reading from StatsCan marked an increase of 1.9% in each of August and September and October. This came at the costs of the gas pump rose 0.9%, having tumbled a month earlier. The acceleration of 2.2% in annual inflation was largely the result of a soft comparison to a year earlier where gasoline prices were tumbling, and CIBC World Markets senior economist Royce Mendes. Should gasoline prices remain stable, the headline inflation rate should also cool back down in the second quarter of next year. The year ago comparisons become a bit firmer, he added. China trims rate. Now, remember, guys, a lot of banks have been bailed out by governments in China. The government has been the communist government's been bailing out their own banks, and it's very interesting to see what's imploding and what's falling apart there in China, because right now their housing market's going towards a mass implosion. It's gonna fall in literally on itself, especially as a lot of that mortar is still drying, and a lot of those condos they built across those ghost cities across China. So China's got its own major problems, especially these trade wars are basically throwing a wrench in their plan, or a wrench in their monkey, whatever, you know what I mean. From Reuters, China's central bank lowered the interest rate on a 14-day reverse purchase agreement by 5 basis points, allowing a similar reduction in short-term liquidity to last month. So, guys, that's like the repo rates, eh? The People's Bank of China said on its website that it was lowering a 14-day reverse repo rate to 2.65% while keeping the 7-day rate unchanged to 2.5%. The PBOC unexpectedly trimmed the 7-day lending rate in November for the first time in more than 4 years, a signal to the markets that policymakers are getting ready to act to prop up slowing growth. GM winds down in Oshawa. We discussed the Oshawa plants there. From the Canadian Press, General Motors Company is winding down production at its Oshawa assembly plant as the era of vehicle production comes to a close for the Ontario city. Some of the roughly 2,600 direct employees at the plant expected to produce the final vehicles today, though the company cautions that the exact timeline could still shift. GM announced in November of last year that it would effectively shut down the plant along with 4 others in the U.S. as a part of a wider restructuring. In May, the company committed to $170 million to convert the plant to stamping and sub-assembly operation to keep about 300 jobs, as well as convert part of the complex into an advanced technology test track. Volvo to sell UD trucks. From Reuters, Volvo AB will sell its Japan-based UD trucks businesses to Isuzu Motors in a deal worth around $2.3 billion US, exciting a low-margin business and boosting its cash pile as competition for high-tech trucking heats up. The deal announced by the companies on Wednesday is a part of a broader alliance that will see them share advanced technology for electronic self-driving trucks, use their combined heft to cut the development costs. UK inflation steady. From the Associated Press, inflation in Britain has held to steady 1.5% in the year of November, official figures show. Wednesday, reinforcing expectations that the Bank of England will not cut its main interest rates on Thursday. The Office for National Statistics said that the largest downward push on the consumer price index came from accommodation services and tobacco, while the largest upward contributions came from food and recreation and culture. Food consumption. Volvo shares in the spotlight on Wednesday after Japan's Isuzu announced the collaboration between the two rival truck makers. They will collaborate in the electrification and autonomous driving. It looks like a similar arrangement of the BMW and Jaguar Land Rover. These partnerships are useful short-term alternatives and mergers and acquisitions. We think this particular partnership probably has less scope to develop over time into a merger, but chances are now clearly improved. So what's happening with this, guys? This is very interesting, because what happens when companies start to falter or start to lose traction? Other companies buy them, right? So you start to see this restructuring of Pac-Man, right? Eating all the little dots, right? Until he gets a monster.
and that's he obtains a company. Then he gets another one until there's only Pac-Man on the board and there's no more monsters to eat up anymore, right?
The UK, in the UK, yesterday afternoon, Prime Minister Boris Johnson confirmed he will put a withdrawal agreement on the Commons vote on Friday. The plan to tie his hands on the negotiations suggested further downside from the pound into 2020. As noted yesterday, it removes any pound benefit from the very large Tory majority, effectively putting us back into the position we would have been in with a narrow majority bound by hardliners. That makes the bullish pound consensus 2020 look increasingly questionable. TD bets on malls. Toronto Dominion Bank, a real estate fund, are making a bigger bet on shopping malls by acquiring 50% stake in Cadillac Fairview Quebec malls, along with the option to buy part of the Sherway Gardens in Toronto.